Welcome to the Mystery College podcast. Today we have a special guest, Gangaji. I first listened to her and spoke with her back in 2018, where she was having a day retreat in Seattle. I was in college at the time, studying comparative religions, and came up to the stage. I asked her, "Hey, how do I fall into myself?" And she followed me up with some really amazing questions, and my answer to those questions was, I don't know. And that was like a beautiful beginning to my self-inquiry and self-discovery practice with mindfulness meditation. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. She has a lot of phenomenal books, seminars, courses you can find at gangaji.org. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jake. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. So my first question for you is like your lineage traces back to Ramana Maharaji and Papaji, and you teach the practice of self-inquiry. So I'm curious about the practice of direct self-inquiry and how people can get started with that practice.
Well, let me start by saying I don't really teach a practice. I teach the willingness to ask truly, who am I, or any various ways of asking that, and then to wait and receive the answer. I know the word practice means lots of different things to different people, but for me, it means something that's done in time and usually repeated actions that are done in time. And often when self-inquiry is taught or practiced as a practice, it's a set of questions that are asked, like who is asking this question or who is feeling this, and it becomes, in my view, something rote. And I'm not interested in a practiced answer or even a practiced revelation, but what is spontaneously and always here when inquiry, which in my view is simply opening the mind to discover what is always here. Who am I? Am I separate from that which is always here? And of course, many different variations depending on the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love how we've got a better clarity about this is not a practice. It's about coming back to the radical presence of the moment
Yeah.
and in beingness.
Yes.
And it's not rote. It's about coming back to this present moment in this dynamic. And the questions may be a tool to come back to that presence.
Maybe often questions that are associated with the non-dual or self-inquiry practice become like postures, like yogic postures, and they can be very beneficial in certain ways. But what I'm really after is the spontaneous recognition of what needs no practice to be what it is, or to be who you are, what is already here, not what's formed or formulated or acquired, but what is already here in its absolute fullness that we as human beings, or you or me as an individual, can actually glimpse when we're willing to stop practicing the activities of our mind, to stop following the habitual comings and goings and yeses and nos. What about? What do you think? Just to stop all that for a moment, to be still, recognize this is who you are.
Mm, mm. It's beautiful. As you share that, I'm evaluating, I'm tuning in with myself, and I notice myself doing a practice, right? I'm posturing, I'm nodding my head, I'm listening attentively, but also as an interviewer, there's also part of my ego structure that is um, trying to maintain its form. However, on the other hand, this beingness, this radical being, has has a very different like requisite, which is being fully present and being fully attentive and open to spontaneity, right? Like when practicing a yoga form, instead of allowing that yoga form or that kriya or posture to come from emergence,
Mm.
as opposed to, rote formulaic. So similarly, I'm wondering what are some ways that folks can begin the process, or rather, or just allow themselves to let go into this radical, spontaneous awareness of themselves.
Wow, that's a great question. And really, the short answer, which I'll give a longer answer in a minute, but the short answer is to stop whatever it is you are doing, to be willing to take a moment and just stop everything. And not to create something, but to recognize what is here when all of the activities of our mind, survival activities, excuse me, acquisition activities, rebellious activities, greedy activities, whatever it may be, if we don't even evaluate or judge them, but just to take a moment and be still, to not follow the thought that is arising, to let that thought just drop back down into where it came from. And in that, there is really a natural recognition of this ground of beingness that no thought is ever absent from, and no thought can ever capture, because it's not made up of a beginning and a middle and an end. It's the oceanic life that is the truth of who you are. So that's the beginning. We begin at the end. And,
Begin.
and yes, that's it. And that's what makes this really radical. This from Papaji, it had nothing to do with what acquisitions may have occurred, or what you had learned, or what you'd memorized, or even what you had experienced. It was to take this moment and freshly know nothing, and yet be conscious. We know nothing every night when we drop into sleep, and we're refreshed from that knowing nothing. And it's an invitation to, in the waking state, to open as we open in deep sleep, to be willing to be unprotected in this moment, because most of our mental activity is some form of protection. Where's the danger? What do I need to do? What do I need to remember? What do I keep? What do I get rid of? On and on and on. And this is an invitation to be unprotected for this moment and to recognize what is here that is free and is always here. And that's the crucial bit.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I'm curious how, like, to be unguarded and for one to let go of the ego structures and the dynamics, like the title, like for me right now, podcast interviewer, or for, or when I'm with my family, son, husband, or friend. There are these, what happens when we let go of these labels? What happens when we simply drop into ourselves, drop into that emotion, that huge ocean of being that that Papaji speaks of, that you speak of?
Well, what happens is the possibility of a truly creative life experience. So with your son, or your partner, or the world, with a tree, with the ocean, it's in those moments where we aren't describing it and labeling it and thinking, this is my son, this is a tree, this is an ocean, just a direct experience with no name, that we really meet it, that we really experience the love that's present. And that has gotten shoved into the background in our very materialistic culture. I live an ordinary life. I'm not in an ashram. I'm not in a retreat. So I'm not speaking about needing to divorce yourself from ordinary life. I'm just speaking about the opportunity in any moment, which you already have when you've had moments of being in love or experiencing communion of some kind in nature or with another, of just opening without describing, without evaluating, without protecting, without accumulating, just being here, being freely here, then that's our nature. And I mentioned going to sleep at night because that is what has to occur before we are refreshed in sleep. But we somehow put that into the 8 hours that we aren't present in our lives. But that's unnecessary, and that's a detrimental categorization of what is always here. You can do your job very well. I mean, oh, what a podcast though, where we're actually meeting without recourse to what we think should be happening. We're actually discovering what is here. Who are you? Who am I? Who is this? What is this?
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. How beautiful that is to be present and allow emergence to unfold from that state of being.
It's
And
natural.
yeah, it's so natural. And as an extension of that, uh, and how beautiful that is to for you to model that this type of being, this presence is available not just in the ashram, but also in the ordinary life, in the 16 hours that we're awake day to day, maybe in our traffic commute or going through the grocery store or picking up kids from work or filing out forms. Like the opportunity there to be in a state is fantastic.
Yes, well, that's the point of this teaching, this transmission from Papaji and from Ramana. It's to discover what doesn't come and go. And all states come and go. But this is sometimes referred to as the stateless state. It's what is here regardless of any other state. If you just take a moment and check, if you're angry, say, we're certain that this stateless state is not present when we're angry. But if you take a moment in the midst of feeling anger without changing anything, except for a moment stopping the narrative about anger and just experiencing anger, very quickly you experience what's under anger. And sometimes it is another emotion, could be fear, could be some, could be love. But the willingness to not change anything, but to see through everything, to look deeper into what is always here, that is discoverable in what comes and goes, if that makes sense.
Mm. To see what's discoverable, what comes and goes, and the willingness to be in presence with, say, an emotion like anger, to see through it instead
You are
of
frozen. I don't know if you can hear
oh,
me,
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
but you are frozen on my
Oh,
screen.
okay. Can you hear me?
Hmm.
Uh-oh.
You were frozen. I'm going to click
Oh,
off. Okay.
okay. Okay.
So I heard what I last saw. It was quite beautiful. So, however you want to do. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, so yeah, just that willingness to process the emotion and to see it as it is, as opposed to wanting to modify and change it. Sometimes I feel that the narrative, and of course, in this process, we let go of the narrative. How in the narrative that we've been taught or that we learn or that forms is that we want is to try to modify the narrative or as a defense mechanism, but we don't need to do that. It's like with sleep, we can drop the armoring and then go to a deeper place.
That's right. We have permission for that. The narrative serves a great purpose, of course, primarily survival. And that's what we are made for as creatures, is to survive so that we can make more creatures like us to survive. And that's beautiful. This is not anti-survival, although there is present with this a willingness to meet death, because that's what it feels like when you're actually not reaching for the next thought that we are so habituated to reaching toward, and we are so trained that that is what we need to survive, to be willing in a moment of just being to die.
Mm.
And in that, you won't die. Eventually, you will die. But in that moment of being willing to, you actually have a taste of what is deathless, of what is present when this, before this body was born, and during the life of this body, and after this body dies, which it will. So it's a precious moment, and it's what all the great traditions were really pointing to, in the radicalness of Ramana, who wasn't really trained as a great master. He had an interest in those things, and he was naturally a yogi, I think, but he wasn't trained in yoga. And Papaji was a man of the world who found Ramana and fell at his feet and absorbed his lessons, but then went back into the world and lived a life, saving some of his family who was on the point of being killed in what is now Pakistan, and brought them back to India. So he was very much in the world, and this is not about something that is outside the world. I thought, well, that can be quite wonderful to spend a weekend or a month or a year in seclusion or in a sattvic kind of experience. That's not necessary. That this is available to you wherever you are, in whatever circumstances you're in, because it's the truth of who you are.
Mm. To be in that state where you're in comfort in facing death, and it's not a true death, but it may present itself that way. But past that Rubicon, past that space, then the ego structures are released, right? Like I might be holding on, clinging really hard to who I am. Oh, I'm Jake. Oh, I'm podcasting with you. And but once I let go of that fear of presenting or of being, I let that go, then there's emptiness, there's potential, abundance.
Yes, and that's what we love, because that's the freshness, that's the connection to oneself, but also, of course, to oneself in other and often.
Yeah.
And we know it when it happens, and we call it connection, or we call it falling in love, or that really worked, or that was real. And we find it in music, and we find it in love relationships. But it's also present in any moment, because it's life recognizing itself, being conscious of itself as free and alive. Life is actually alive. The life in you, the life in the stable, the life in the tree, life in the sky, life in your eyes, the life in your heart. This is all a vibration of life.
Mm. Mm. And speaking of vibration, like tuning into that vibration that connects one to all other vibrations, that puts one
Mm,
back into resonance,
mm,
right? Like putting someone back in tune, back in touch with that part of themselves that can feel all scales of the piano or all scales of sound, of music, of the sense gates. Um, like how does one like paint like a picture of that? But like, but but like when we're painting this picture, it's more like it's coming back to an empty canvas. That's the
mm.
beautiful part. It's like just being able to have a piano and play all the keys. That's the beautiful part. And
Yes.
then the keys that play come from like emergence from the state.
As we know, when we either play or experience great music, or just a moment of purity in music where something else, life is living itself musically in that moment, or naturally in that moment, which may require great preparation for that. And that's, I think, where the yoga comes in terms of a practice or a training, if it's a musician or a dancer or an artist. But for those of us who aren't trained in the yogic arts, or in the arts of painting and music, we there is this free I don't even want to label it as artist. It's not artist, it's beingness, beingness recognizing itself as inherently free. And so the life then that is being lived is in respect and reverence for that. And in that, then the life has an opportunity to be an expression, which is what great art is, an expression of what can't be captured, what can't be put down into the ABC linear thinking, what is free, free of that. And you are free of that. And this is free of that. And yet we have technology here and we have boundaries here and all of that. But none of that is in the way of this discovery, this free discovery. But I think that all the years of yogic practice, the ancient it is, all of that was about respecting the opportunity for that and cultivating the situation for that, whether it's bodily or mentally or circumstantially. And but in that practice, often what got overlooked is it's already here. That life is already here. It's free. And so we can celebrate a yogic practice without it being something that will get me to where I am. You begin with I am. And then, yes, you go as far as you can go, as deep as you can go.
Beautiful. We we are already there, and now we get to enjoy that along whichever journey we're choosing,
Yes.
whether as
Yeah.
artists, as accountants, or parents, people just living our lives. We get to enjoy the empty canvas. We get to enjoy whatever presents itself through emergence when we're playing music, when we're making jazz, when we're just living life and crafting the narrative, the story. There might be some structures and boundaries to what that looks like, right? Like if it's like a pop song, it's going to be 3 minutes long, might have a certain rhythm, but it's still free. We're still playful. It's still coming through emergence. And the same can be said if we're doing any other type of art form from our life, such as building relationships or parenting or just going to the grocery store. There's boundaries, but there's immense freedom.
That's right. That's right. And that's the challenge. That's the gift of a conscious life and the challenge because, as we know, when we recognize that there has been this explosion of freedom or artistic revelation, the tendency, as we are human beings, is to somehow encapsulate that and do it again or repeat that until we recognize, well, that doesn't work. And then we're willing to open again to not knowing. And I'm saying that a life can be lived by that, a life that is structured in terms of meals a day and appointments met and kept and but but free in the midst of that. And we recognize that in each other. That's when we fall in love, and we recognize that in music and in art or in nature. But we sometimes habitually overlook that when it comes to the personal, me, because we are encumbered by these ideas we have about me, ideas that we want to have or ideas that we reject having, this, so that it becomes this cacophony of noise in the head. And the opportunity is to stop, to take a moment and be still. Of course, that's the opportunity of yogic meditation, but it's also the opportunity in any moment that you can function quite well when you stop.
Even right now, even right here,
Maybe especially.
even for the listeners, feeling that, tuning into that. Love it.
Yes, yes, so deep, so good.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what are some ways that when people find themselves, they've latched onto a narrative or they get into a fight, flight, sympathetic response because, maybe kids are yelling, or maybe they're having some friction with a spouse, or a boss is telling them they got to work, put in extra hours this week.
Mm,
When things happen, or someone cuts them off on traffic, right?
yeah.
When those sharp, like quick moments happen, what kind of responses? So if someone is not in a resource place, they fall out of their
Mm.
resourced awareness and being. What are some strategies for them to come back into that? Right? We spoke of it one for sure, right?
Mm.
But I'm willing to paint a few other pictures and yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's so legitimate because it's one thing to speak about being in nature when we're actually in the forest or at the ocean, but nature is also what is here right now, the technology, the cars, the freeways, the mess of it, the noise of it. So we can recognize that our responses change to that. Sometimes we are contracted in particular aspects of the world, and sometimes we're expanded. But deeper than that can be the simple recognition, simple but profound, of what is here in this moment, whether it's a negative moment or a positive moment. What is here that is always here? What is here in the worst moments and what is here in the best moments? And then there's a kind of vigilance that is born of that, that is not seeking for a bliss feeling to determine if we are recognizing the truth of oneself, or not deciding that since there's a negative feeling, I must have lost the truth of myself. But we're really able to inquire quite naturally what is still here, that is always here in good times and in the worst times. And when we recognize that and tell the truth about that, then there's room for all the rest, the full spectrum of existence. Since it is here, there's certainly room for it, but there's room for it in our minds too. Our minds can accept that there are positive and negative feelings, but there is the presence that is aware of positive and negative feelings that's unchanging. And that's where we take our refuge.
Take our refuge in the unchanging presence. And
Yes.
I love how we contextualize and made that understandable for myself as a seeker, as many are, have been, will be, or like I've sought out, like, and tried, sometimes evaluated how I'm feeling against like a bliss emotion when that doesn't really work.
Doesn't work.
Comes and goes.
That's the old style. You
Yeah.
should be feeling this. You should not be feeling this. But those words are, egoic. That's super
Yeah.
ego.
Super
So
ego.
if we instead it's I am feeling this, okay, but
Uh-huh.
I'm also aware of this feeling, if it's positive or if it's negative, and that awareness is present. Even in deep sleep, awareness is present. So without making awareness an object, good awareness or bad awareness, just simple, omnipresent awareness.
Mm.
The
And
presence
that's
of
where that
oneself.
vigilance comes in, like you
Yes.
shared.
Well,
Wow.
we're not trained to even be aware of that. We're trained to behave in a certain way. And when we grow up, we switch our training to another way. And this is what it just the simplicity and the depth and the vastness of who it is we are. We are
Mm.
this awareness, and all the rest is attached onto or detached from, coming and going. This is the constant tria
Yeah.
concept.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I have a question about like having the more you've been familiar with this presence for, like, on a very deep level, on a continuous level for many, many, many years. So I'm curious about, like, when you've reevaluated or looked back at your life, like from childhood, being a teenager, adults, or traveling through India, like different developmental cycles up until the point where you came into this in a much more deeper, profound way to this moment. What are some awarenesses that you had about the quality or the qualities of being being in this beingness
Mm.
and living through it in your development cycles as a human being?
Mm. I never considered being aware and looking at the awareness. I was always considering, how do I feel? And is this good for me or is this bad for me? And will this give me something, even if I called it give me more of myself? Until I was with Papaji and he said, just take a moment and stop everything. And when I started to go into a sort of meditative pose, and he said, no, 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 stop that too. That's too much. Just stop and tell the truth. What is here in this moment that is always here? And after I recognized my fear of stopping and then just open to stopping, I recognized, of course, this has always been here. So I could look back into my being a teenager or being miserable or feeling like I had won something or I had lost something. And there is always this constancy of present awareness that just got overlooked because it was so constant. I was actually looking for changes. I wanted it to be better. I wanted it to be more this and get rid of that. And so I was tragically overlooking this presence that is at peace with itself, regardless of circumstances. Certainly, we all want good circumstances, but certainly we know at this point we don't always have good circumstances. And so it's not about relying or changing or fixing your circumstances, even though that's natural and you're allowed to. We do want to fix our circumstances, and I support that. But even before we fix it, to take the split second, Papaji once said it takes 1/12 of a second to be aware of what is always here. And then you can check. You're in a good mood, you check. Is that which I was aware of still here? You check. You're in a bad mood, things aren't going well, you check. Is that still here? And after a while, that's the vigilance on simply the wonder, keeping vigil at the wonder of what is always here. This vast, simple, unchanging awareness. Certainly, my relationship with it has changed over the years from being a baby to a teenager to an adult to now an old woman. So my relationship has changed, but it hasn't changed. It doesn't age, it's not subject to conditions. And that's the thrill, absolutely the thrill to recognize this is already here. And what we can cultivate is a respect for that or a vigilance to that and a love of that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love how it all played and tied in. Like that that this an aspect of awareness of that changes through life cycles,
Mm,
but
mm,
that 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 is itself is a unchanging, ever-present quality,
mm,
right? And that and with that we cultivate aware vigilance with that through our life and cultivate a quality of love with it
mm.
or a recognition of love that
Recognition.
comes through the emergence.
Yeah, good correction. Recognition is right because it's not separate from love. It's Satchitananda, right? It's consciousness, aware of itself as being and overflowing in love of and in that being.
Lovely.
Lucky life we have as human beings to have the opportunity for this reflective consciousness. This is really what the question, who am I? And what inquiry is pointing to simply stop and say, what is this that is unchanging? What is this that is always here? And am I separate from that? Have I ever been separate from that?
And as we ask that, as silence comes through, and there's a feeling from my ego emerging that says, stop, stop, I might die.
Well, oh, that's great. That's right. Because we are unprotected in our minds in that moment. We aren't doing something. We aren't hiding. We aren't fighting. We aren't reaching out for something. We are exposed in that moment.
Yeah.
And so, yes, all kinds of fears and future projections can arise, but in the willingness to let them come and let them go, you recognize what's unmoving, that presence of what is always here is by its nature always here. You don't have to make it be here. You don't have to think you can lose it. You can definitely lose experience of it. And that's the matter of how is it that we lose the experience of it, and how is it that we actually open to the experience of it being ongoing.
And one thing that occurred to me is that when if I'm unkind to myself
Mm.
when there's breaks, then that doesn't help. But when I'm kind to myself, then my ego structure is a little more willing to let go, a little more open to being vigilant, and then things start to go in the right direction. So I'm
That's
wondering
beautiful.
how kindness might play into this for people to be generous with themselves as they come back to this point of awareness, and to forgive themselves for any needless suffering or stories,
That's
as
so
it just
beautiful.
come back to heart.
That's so beautiful because generally we interact with ourselves internally with the ego and the superego in battle with each other in a harsh way because we have been trained that way. I'm not so sure about your generation, but my generation was certainly trained in the way we were spanked, if we were bad, and we were punished, and we were made to feel like we were bad people, bad children, shouldn't wrong person. And that gets profoundly internalized psychologically. And that's part of our imprisonment because we want to be good, we want to be free, and we think we're doomed because we've been taught we're doomed. So that's where the moment of being willing to be absolutely silent, to feel how the punishment maybe is arising reflexively in our own psyches, and to just stop. And if there's a technique, I would say the technique would be, okay, I'm bad, I'm horrible, I'm irredeemable, and now what? So you don't have to fight it, and you don't have to indulge it. You can open to whatever appears because there will be people in your life who will tell you that, or there will be events in your life where you will deduce that in fact I was bad, and maybe you did cause whatever happened negatively to happen, and you make those corrections, but you don't need to punish yourself. You can open the walls of your prison by recognizing in the midst of all of this super egoic punishment, what is untouched by that? What is still free? What is still here that was here before you discovered you were bad, in the midst of discovering you're bad, and after you have been released from being bad? And that's the presence of yourself, which is not subject to evaluation.
And that's the great gift of being a human, is the opportunity to be in recognition of that.
Yes, yes, precious life that we get to, that we have such a developed mind stream that we can reflect back on its source.
Hmm. Hmm. So fascinating. So fascinating. Yeah. And it makes me like excited for myself, for listeners, viewers, like what can come up for them through emergence of awareness of this space,
Yes.
holding this awareness, being vigilant with this awareness, being forgiving
Mm.
when the awareness of this oscillates in and out. And that's okay.
I would just make one slight change to that. I would say rather than holding this is being held by
Being,
this.
oh, yes.
Because the you and you or in me or in I or in we or us or them is all an object in mind. And this is the subject. This is the true subject.
Yeah. Being held. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Being held like a baby.
Yes, yes, being loved like a baby, being freshly loved. And there's a vigilance that goes with that because, of course, that can be sentimentalized into some kind of absurdity, or it can be used as a point of punishment. You will not be held as a baby, you will be punished or hurt.
Mm.
And so, just to return to what is naturally here, then you are held in that naturally. And there certainly are lessons that we can always learn from mistakes we make, but we don't need to be punished. We don't need to be put in prison. We can be set free because this awareness itself is trustworthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not up to me to come to you and beg, please, please give me the key. No. I gotta, from the sounds of it, I gotta go. I have the key. Can
Yes,
unlock it.
that's right. It's already unlocked. It's just really to be willing to examine. And what my role is to ask you the questions that turn your attention back to your direct experience
Yeah.
rather than your learned experience.
Yeah. You see, because like I've been in myself so long, I'm holding the handlebars, I'm shaking it, I'm screaming, help, help, I'm shaking it. And then here you come along, you come to me and say, hey, Jake, do you see that thing behind you? I say, okay. You see that golden thing? Oh, there's the key. So let's get out of here. And
That's right.
I'm like, well, I really want to keep shaking this. I've got a lot of anger. And then you're like, okay, well,
Yeah,
do you see the key? And I go up to, okay, yeah, I'll try it. Oh, I'm free.
that's it.
Oh, I'm here. So it's free.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. That's right. Because in that is encapsulated our refusal until maybe there's just a readiness or a willingness or the mystery of you say, okay, okay, I'll check. What is this key? What does it unlock? Then you see for yourself.
We see for ourselves.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Yeah. Are there any last words, comments, pieces of advice or perspective you'd like to offer viewers?
Well, I mentioned the word vigilance, and I don't see that as a punishing word. I see that as like a golden word,
Mm,
the golden key word. We have this capacity to simply stop for a few seconds and tell the truth first and primarily of what is here that is always here.
mm,
And then we can tell the truth of how is it our egoic structure is denying that or obeying that or being humbled by that. So we don't have to exclude our behavior from this opening, from this freedom. It's not contingent on our behavior, but our behavior can be the vigilance that is in awe of this that is not only always here, but always fresh, always alive, and always in love.
mm.
That's what we meet when we see each other. That's what we recognize.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. I think we got a new sequel to the diamond in your pocket, right?
The
This
golden
could be
key.
the golden key in your pocket.
That's great. That's yours to write then.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's everyone's to write.
Well, you called it. You came up with that phrase. It's beautiful.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. And anyone and folks can find more of Gangaji's teachings on her website, gangaji.org. Wonderful courses, groups, seminars, practices, live events. Um, yeah, fantastic resources and more amazing books as well.
Mm. Thank you. I love being with you. It's a beautiful reflection of oneself.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a
Mm,
great honor.
mm, mm, mm. Bye.